So, Joe, I see that you have continued to be busy on the social medias promoting all of the bookworm things.
It's quite fun. I should probably stop at some point, but...
Well, people are noticing. My wife specifically noticed, and she's like, so what's the deal with the bookworm YouTube channel? I'm like, just go look at it, and hopefully it makes sense.
If you're on YouTube and you would rather listen to the show through YouTube, people do that.
Yeah, I know, which I don't understand, but...
I was looking at the stats. It's not a ton of people, but there are people listening to the show through YouTube now. So even has the waveforms and everything.
Yeah, I noticed that. That's entertaining for about 30 seconds. I don't think I could look at that for an hour and a half.
Yep.
But hey, you do you.
I know. It was zero work to add the waveform. So anyway, the audiograms are way cooler with that. But
yeah, that's true.
Those are kind of a fun deal. But yes, I've been posting. I had a little bit of some breaks here and there because I was gone last week. Was out in North Carolina celebrating our anniversary. And so I had a bunch of things scheduled for while I was gone, but had a little bit of a hiatus for whenever I got back. But it should pick up now. So I've got like the next few days taken care of. And then the next week we'll keep pushing through it. But yeah, I mean, you can follow Bookworm on Instagram. It's bookworm.fm on Instagram. Also, we are on Twitter. I realize we don't talk about Twitter. We've been on Twitter for a very long time. Is that from day one, probably? I don't remember when we started that one.
Yeah, I think it is. But it's interesting. Yeah, we never mention it. And it's also the only real social media platform that I hang out on. So if you want to get my attention, you have to come to Twitter.
Sure.
Sorry, everybody.
So we are on Twitter. I've been changing up how that has operated. I've been keeping tabs on all of the authors we've read in the past and just trying to pay attention to which of them have new books coming out and posting about those as they come up. There's a lot. Links that have to do with libraries, books you should read, et cetera, et cetera. So there's quite a few things I'm doing there that I haven't done previously. So all that to say, I've been doing stuff on social media, and it's been kind of fun.
Cool. Have you gotten many submissions for listener bookshelves?
I have a couple, yeah. So I have a few there that'll start coming out. Is that tomorrow? I don't remember. There's yes. And I would love some more.
Well, I haven't looked at the buffer, so I have no idea.
Yeah, I would love more. So if you have, and it doesn't matter, and I had a couple people ask me this, does it have to be my personal library? No. If you find, even if it's a bookstore and you took a cool picture of it, like pictures of bookshelves, period, libraries at bookworm.fm, send me an email. I would love to see those. And if you have an Instagram account, shoot me your username for that, and I'll make sure you're tagged in that photo. So yeah, hit me up. I'm all over that.
Cool. I guess we should mention MacStock one more time for all of you who are procrastinating until the last possible moment. Well, if you're listening to this and you haven't gotten a ticket for MacStock, but you still want to come, congratulations. This is the last possible moment.
Yes.
Because this episode will drop exactly 1 week before MacStock starts. So you do not have a lot of time, but I believe the coupon code will work up until the beginning of MacStock. So if you have not purchased a weekend pass and you want to get one for $179 instead of $249, which is a savings of $70 for those of you who aren't math nerds, you can use the coupon code FOCUSED, FOCUSED. Apparently there are multiple ways to spell focused. I always thought it was just a single S, but apparently it's also valid to use it with two S's. That's not the way you spell the coupon code though. FOCUSED will save you $70, and you'll be able to come hang out with me, Joe. Our buddy Josh is going to be there. He's presenting. David Sparks is going to be there. They're doing the Mac Power Users episode 500 live as part of MacStock, so it'll be a good time.
I'm looking forward to that. I really want to see how this live event goes for MPU. I think that'll be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, this one will be interesting because it's also like a milestone show. So I attended MPU live in Chicago. When was that? In the spring, I think. And Chris Bailey came down and we hung out together. So that was kind of fun. But that was like a normal episode. They obviously had a couple guests come on, but they talked Mac power user stuff. And this one, I believe, is going to be kind of basically Steven's collecting questions from listeners that Max Sparky's going to answer. And it's kind of a weird episode too, because it's episode 500, but Steven just joined this year. So in the forum, there's a lot of people saying, "Oh, it'd be great if Katie could be there," and she's not coming.
Right.
Sorry.
Right.
Feel kind of bad for Steven, but I don't know. I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun, but I also think it's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah. I mean, what do you do? I mean, things morph, things change. You got to deal with situations as they come. So
the one constant throughout the years is Bookworm.
We just keep going.
We've had our moments. It's been close a couple times, but
That's
you mentioned
true.
the other day, and I don't think I responded to it because I just saw it in passing and I forgot, but you mentioned that we've been at this for over 3 years now, which is kind of cool. So
Yeah.
I honestly didn't realize that until you had tweeted about it.
Right.
So thanks
Yeah.
for doing that. Immediately when you mentioned that, I went into retrospective mode and I'm like, how am I different now than I was 3 years ago? Like,
Sure.
what have I learned that I didn't know when we started this podcast? And it's hard to put a specific number or identify a specific thing. I would say that one big thing that's changed is the way that I read books. I feel like I get a lot more of the books that I read now because I've kind of developed this MindNode system, and that's very different than when we first started, where I was just jotting down a couple of things that stood out to me from the book that we read. And I don't think that's necessarily a wrong way to do it either, but I do recognize that I find myself remembering and retaining information a lot better ever since episode 42, I think, was kind of a tipping point. I think that was the one where we did how to read a book. So I don't know, any navel gazing you want to do over the last 3 years of Bookworm?
Maybe. I mean, there's a lot of things that I could say about it. I mean, there's this. The only reason I thought about it is because I was thinking this is my third Mac stock, and I went to my first Mac stock right after we started Bookworm. That's how I came to the realization that, holy cow, it's been 3 years. I mean, some people look at it and say we're on episode 72. That's a little over a year if you're doing it weekly, but we don't. And we've had some spells where it's been 3, sometimes 4 weeks between episodes, which means it takes a while to go through 72 books, not including all the gap books too. So there's a lot of time involved there. I have noticed, though, that over time, kind of what you're saying, like the way that you read books morphs and changes over time. And I used to go through a book and it's like, okay, this is borderline life-altering. But as time goes on, you kind of shift away from expecting books to be life-altering, and you're just looking for 1 or 2 snippets out of them.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's not any fault to the books. It's purely the mass amount of information that you collect on a regular basis. So because of the number and the volume of information, number of books and the volume of information that we go through, the chances of running across one as impactful as Man's Search for Meaning is quite slim. So you're only going to have the cream of the crop that do that. So it's been kind of fascinating to see that over time. So it's been a good run. I'm happy for the last 3 years. Go Bookworm.
Yeah, and thank you to all the listeners who have faithfully listened over the years, and specifically got to call out the premium members, the people who are actually willing to pay a couple bucks a month in order to support us in this crazy venture of reading a book every couple weeks. So the show doesn't exist without you all. So thank you for your support.
Certainly. And little teaser, we have something to add to the premium memberships, which we'll mention at the end. Cliffhanger. Sorry. Had to do it.
All right. Should we jump into action items?
Sure. I have an epic fail on mine this time. Goal was to start writing letters to my kids. You would think this would be something that would be highly motivating and I would just jump on immediately, and I haven't touched it. Isn't that sad? That
is kind of sad.
It's quite terrible whenever, and even when I'm saying this out loud, it kind of hurts me to say this, but yes, I haven't touched it. I have the notebook.
Well, that's step one.
I have the notebook, have the pen. I know what I want to do. I just haven't done it. I'm going to do this first thing tomorrow morning.
All right.
Because it's Saturday, and I will have the time.
Okay.
Going to do it.
My action item was to build out my story file in day one, which I have done, but not to... It's not complete, but then again, it's probably never going to be complete. So I did add a bunch of things from my trip to Costa Rica, inspired by my wife the other day, who said, "Hey, did you do that?" Because she was listening to Bookworm. Oh, shoot, I forgot. But I did do it. And I still have some, I still want to flesh out some of the stuff, but I have the rough bullet points that I mentioned from the last episode where I have the building blocks there, but I do want to add some more meat to those things. And then also I haven't gone back and just retrospective all of the crazy events that have happened even in the last couple of years, but really throughout the course of my life, I haven't gone through and gotten all of that stuff in there, which is ultimately what I want to do with this. And then once I have all of that, obviously it's being aware of things as they happen so that I can continue to build that out. So this one's never going to be finished, but made some decent progress on it anyways.
Sure. Good job.
Thanks. That was pretty quick for action items, but I believe we're ready to go into today's book.
I think so. I'm excited about this one. It'll be fun.
All right. So I have a disclaimer here because I mentioned when I picked this one, that this is kind of the anti-systems book. Well, actually, there is a system in here.
Yep.
It's not really a system.
Did you forget that there's a system in this?
Yeah, I guess I kind of did because they talk about it right at the beginning. We'll get into that. But then there's a whole bunch of tactics and things and basically apply this however you want. So I did that. I applied it however I wanted and completely chucked the system and totally forgot about it. So there is a very basic system, which we'll talk about here. But this is Make Time, How to Focus on What Matters Every Day by Jake Knapp and John Zeratsky. And it is very different than some of the other systems books that we have read because it is not prescriptive. Just follow XYZ and you'll get 1, 2, 3. Instead, it is a basic framework that they present at the beginning and then a whole bunch of tactics, they call them, and you pick and choose the ones that you want to use. And there are a ridiculous number of these. Let's see, 86 of them.
Of the tactics?
But they say at the very beginning, you're not going to use all of them. Just pick and choose the ones that seem to work for you. And they're all based off of personal experience and kind of experiments that they've tried on themselves. And it's written by two people who have the same approach, but also different things work for different people. And they kind of compare and contrast that. There's also some awesome illustrations in this book.
Yes.
I don't have it in front of me. I'm not sure who did the illustrations, but they're amazing.
I think it was Jake. It's one of the two.
Okay. But they're great because there are several times when they're talking about technology and they've got all of these cartoon animations for a computer or an iPhone, which I don't know, seeing it drawn like that paints it in a different light. At least it did for me when I was going through it. It feels like you have more control over those things, which is really what they want to, that's the point they want to make throughout the book, is that you do have control over this stuff.
Right.
But it feels a lot more approachable when it's a cartoon form, you're not so scared of the machine.
Yeah.
My opinion anyways.
No, that's fair. I have to say, when I picked this up, I opened the front cover. This isn't even to the first page. This is on the cover itself. On the inside, there's this diagram, which looks like a system. And I read some of the captions that go with this diagram, and my first thought was, wait, I thought this was not a systems book. Mike rails on systems books. And then he picked one. I hadn't even got to the first page yet.
Yeah. So I had to throw that disclaimer out there because there is a diagram. It's not as intimidating as it looks like. The one on the inside cover you're talking about, right? Where they have a couple of arrows and things. Yeah. And I personally, I don't know. I guess you could call this a system. I don't know. It doesn't feel like a system compared to all of the other systems that we've covered in all of the other books that we've read. It feels to me like this is how your body is designed to work. And it's going to do this and you can like maximize any one of these areas using the different tactics. Like you can kind of figure out what works, plug and play. But I don't know. Well, let's just talk about the system, I guess.
Well, and
since we're here.
Yeah, and let me just say this, because I would say that the quote unquote system, and I think the reason you're waffling on it a little bit is because really the system is the one thing. So the book, the one thing, picking one thing and focusing on that for your day and getting it done. Like that's really it. That's my perception of it anyway.
I think so, although I think even the one thing has more of a system. So you could condense this one in Make Time to pick one thing and focus on it. That's it.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's kind of the idea behind Make Time is like, well, you're not going to find time. If you are constantly just going from one thing to the next, whatever happens to pop up in front of you, you're going to find yourself not doing the things that are important to you. So how do you do that? Well, you pick a highlight. That's the first part of the system. That's the focal point, the single activity to prioritize and protect on your calendar. And this is an interesting idea to me. I have an action item associated with this, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. It's kind of like what's going to be the highlight of your day as you're planning it, whether it's the night before or in the morning. And then the next piece of that is laser. So you're going to do everything you can to limit your distractions so that you can focus on your highlight. You're going to control your technology so that you can easily find that laser mode. And then underneath that, kind of related to laser, is this energize piece. So you need to use your body to recharge your brain. And this is where things like exercise, food, sleep, quiet, face-to-face time come in. And then reflect, where you recognize what worked, what didn't, and then you adjust and improve your system. This is kind of like journaling before you would go to bed. That's kind of how I use that.
Sure.
And that's why I guess, I didn't think of this as a system, because I feel like I have my own journaling system, okay, which overlaps with this system in the reflect piece, but also like isn't a one-to-one matching of the reflect piece of their system either. So I feel like this right here is kind of how your body wants to function if you were to just get out of its own way. And all of the tactics are things that you can use to kind of like trim the fat, so to speak, where you can kind of prune your own day-to-day so that your body can kind of just flow in this natural state. I'm probably not doing a very good job of explaining this, but it doesn't feel like something like, okay, I need to make an intentional choice to follow these simple steps so that I can get this result. Does that make sense? Yeah,
I mean, if this might be an easy way to do it. So I don't know if we can put a picture of the show notes, this whole diagram. But there's really four aspects to it. One is off on the side. So there's 3 points to this: highlight, laser, and reflect. And then energize is underneath the laser point, because you won't be able to laser focus 100% of the time. But they do have little descriptions for each of these. So highlight, start each day by choosing a focal point. Laser, beat distraction to make time for your highlight. Reflect, adjust and improve your system every day. And then the energize is take care of your body to recharge your brain, and that feeds into the laser piece. So with each of those, essentially what you're doing is picking one thing, the most important thing to do for the day, focusing on it, and then try to figure out how well did you do at it and make adjustments and improve. Like, that's really it.
Yeah, and then also to complicate this simple diagram even further.
Yeah.
Like energize is underneath. It doesn't really have its own place in the flow. But the rest of the book is broken into some different sections. So we're talking about the introduction right now. The next section is how Make Time works. Actually, I guess that's kind of what we're talking about right now. The introduction, that's where they talk about the fact that they're time dorks and how this isn't a productivity book. They make that very clear right at the beginning. Maybe that's another reason why I didn't think of it as a systems book. But then they're broken down into the sections: highlight, laser, energize, and then reflect is the last section. And for highlight, laser, and energize, there are a whole bunch of tactics that go along with it. For reflect, there really isn't. For reflect, there's a couple things. There's the scientific method they talk about, and there are 3 hypotheses, which we'll get to in a little bit, and a form that they use to rate how they did during the day. But like I said, I journaled the same sort of stuff. So, there was nothing new for me in that particular section. But kind of the approach we took with this is because there's these different sections and all these different tactics and no way that we'll get through all of them, is we kind of picked out a couple that we wanted to talk about specifically. And actually, before we get into some of the specific tactics, we probably should talk about a couple other main ideas that will resurface throughout the book, and that is infinity pools and the busy bandwagon.
Yes. Now, I do want to preface the infinity pools piece with these 2 guys, Jake Knapp and John Zeratsky. They are ex-Google employees. One of them worked on Gmail. The other one worked on YouTube.
Yeah, I think Jake was email and John was YouTube.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that most everybody has heard of Gmail and YouTube. I don't think there's anyone listening that hasn't heard of those 2 services. Yep. So these guys worked on those and helped bring about some of the modern day views that we use today in those tools. Infinity pools, it's what it sounds like. Anything that has an infinite amount of information it can give to you. A Twitter feed, an Instagram feed, a YouTube list of videos, like things that if you refreshed, you would get something new every single time. It's infinite, thus an infinity pool.
Yeah, it's interesting because there are things that fall into the category of infinity pool, though, that you wouldn't really think of as infinity pools. I first heard about this book when I interviewed Shahid Ahmad in episode 70, I believe, of Focused. And he's a video game developer who got rid of his iPhone 10 and went down to like an iPhone SE after reading this book, and basically deleted all of the infinity pools off of his device. And that was, I thought, kind of a drastic approach, especially for a video game developer.
Right.
But it really got me interested in the idea. And he mentioned a couple things, like he needed to order some screwdrivers off of Amazon. So he had the Amazon app open, and he went and he found the screwdrivers, but then he continued to search through the Amazon app. And he's like, oh, that's an infinity pool. That's got to go.
Yeah.
Like anything that has additional information and you can never exhaust, basically, that's what an infinity pool is.
Even a web browser, Safari on your phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Could be the same thing, for sure. The other piece of this busy bandwagon, overflowing inboxes, stuffed calendars, endless to-do lists. I mean, how many things have we talked about numerous times, Mike? They all play into this busy bandwagon mindset that if you want to meet the demands that people place on us and just keep up with everything that's going on, you will be overwhelmed and way too busy.
Yes.
That's the busy bandwagon.
Yep, exactly. And these are not new ideas, but the way they describe them, I think, is very approachable. I feel like the infinity pools specifically, like once you grasp the idea of that, you're going to identify those all over the place.
Right.
Like it just kind of sticks with you. You're going to be going through whatever app you have on your phone. You'll think you've got it all cleaned up. You're not going to be distracted anymore. And then you'll be in something like, dang it, this is an infinity pool. It's got to go.
Yeah. And part of the reason that they bring these things up is because they also have this concept of defaults. Again, we've talked about this before. Most of this book is not groundbreaking. Like, it's not something brand new. They're just packaging a bunch of things that have been talked about before in a very unique way.
Yep.
But this concept of defaults is, what is your default answer in a given scenario? You're standing in line, you're waiting, what's your default answer? Most people, it's pull out the phone and entertain yourself in some way.
Yep.
Their argument is change your defaults. So many of the tactics that we'll get into later revolve around changing your defaults.
Yep, definitely. All right, so that being said, I think we're ready to dive into some of these tactics. So let's go into the next, and I'm going to call this the first section, and that is highlight. Now, in here, they've got in each of these these sections, they have a little bit of information at the beginning, and then they've got a whole bunch of tactics that go along with it. And so let's talk about some of the specific tactics here that relate to highlights. But then I also want to talk about from this section, they talk about the problem with to-do lists. I feel like the tactics are the place to start here, though.
Sure.
So one of the ones that I really liked under the choose your highlight section for the tactics was number 5, the might do list. And when I read this, I kind of thought that this was the approach I was trying to articulate with my back burner context way back in the day.
Oh, the one that gave you grief for?
Yeah, and I have not used in a very long time.
Because I was right.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I don't really use OmniFocus anymore, but that's another conversation for another day. Yeah. So number 5, the might do list. Basically, the approach here is you've got a whole list of things that you might do, and then you look at that list and you pick the one that's going to be your highlight. And if I'm remembering right, my use case for this back burner context was these are the things that I might do. And then I was going to pick the ones that I wanted to do from there for the things that that were going to become my most important tasks for the day. I think that's, from memory, I believe that's kind of how I was defining that. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but I think that I was fairly close to describing what they describe as the might do list. The only difference is that I was selecting multiple things and they're saying just pick one. And I like their version better. Just pick one. Because the task manager, basically, my little note in this section, like that is your might do list. And when you select more than one thing, as you go throughout your day, you can find yourself kind of going back and forth between them, trying to find the path of least resistance. And they say that you're especially vulnerable on page 51 to the path of least resistance thinking when you don't actually plan. But I've found it even when I do plan and I've selected 5 different things that I'm going to work on throughout the day. You look at the first one and you're like, I don't really want to do that right now. What's next on the list?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But when you have a highlight, it brings you back to this is the thing that you said is absolutely critical for today. So that's the thing you work on. And when you get that done, if you got more in the tank, then you can just tackle the next thing on the list and you can get ahead. But when you make one thing the highlight, it's a lot easier, for me anyways, to transition into go mode for that. And then they would say, take that a step further and put it on your calendar. I kind of do this with my daily planning sheet. I block all my time, although I haven't specifically gone to the length of blocking out, 3 hours for I'm going to work on this specific thing. I just kind of frame out like I'm going to, for these hours, actually like the beginning of the day, for example, today I've got an hour set aside for my morning routine, and then I'm going to be home and I'm going to be writing. And then I've got, recording Bookworm with Joe blocked off from 1 to 3 p.m. Central Time. And then more writing after that. And then later tonight, we've got a men's meeting at our church. So those are the types of things where I'm blocking out all the different hours throughout my day. But I don't have specifically on there, write this specific thing for this specific project. That feels to me like a step too far. But I do have, and this is kind of where one of my action items comes in, of adding the highlight to my daily planning template. I did redo that, and I do have now at the top of my daily planning template an area for my highlights. So I pick one thing that's going to become my focus. And I found, since I started doing that even just like a week ago, that that's really helpful. That really keeps me on track, make sure that I don't waste the beginning of my day, which is really my biological prime time, or Jocelyn Kiglai would call it like your golden hours, like when you're really in a state generally to do good focused work. You don't want to waste that time trying to decide what to do. So by planning my day the night before, by putting my highlight on there, it's a lot easier to, okay, let's just do this.
Yeah, I have to say, this whole concept of a might-do list, it still feels weird to me. It seems like just a someday maybe project list. Maybe that's all it is. But it never, like, to me, it's the same thing as when we had this back burner context thing that we were talking about way back now. Like, it feels very similar to that. I totally understand your interest in it. I just don't work off of lists like that, and it just feels so weird.
Yeah, Well, here's the thing. Like, as we're recording this, what was it, like last week? OmniFocus added the ability to drop a task, right?
Yeah.
So the reason they added that feature is because people have things on their list that they don't want to do anymore, and they're dropping them. So that illustrates my point that your task manager is essentially a might-do list. You can only pick one thing from that list that you're going to work on at a given time. You can have a whole bunch of things, flag 5 things that you want to do today, but kind of the revelation I got as I'm going through this is like, that's too much. You got to pick one thing.
Sure.
One thing only. That's going to be your focus. You can't say, I'm going to focus and prioritize this, that, and the other thing. You got to pick one. And if you can't say one thing is the most important, then you're operating, whether you realize it or not, where everything is kind of on this might-do list and everything is in your back burner context. And you're kind of always looking at it thinking, what should I be doing right now? And kind of freaking out whenever you choose something because you may have chosen the wrong thing. At least that was my experience.
Right. Another tactic from this section is tactic number 13, design your day. And you kind of mentioned it here a little bit ago with scheduling time for your highlight, your focal point for the day. And they take this a step further and use like the hyper scheduling or the block scheduling concept and design every moment of the entire day so that they know when each thing is going to happen. This is not something I can do given my current work scenario. Being in IT, you never know when people are coming up, but I'm assuming this is something you would like to try.
Yeah, and I would argue this is something that I have been doing with my daily planning template. But this is awesome. And this is the reason why like I've kind of gone away from OmniFocus, because I recognize that OmniFocus can collect the things that I have to do personally. But for all of the other teams that I have worked with, they all use something different for collaborating on a project. And I went back and I thought through in the last year, what are all the teams that I've worked with and the programs that they've used. And at one point, I was working with teams that were using Jira, Basecamp, Asana, Patio, and there was one other one. There were 5 of them, all at the same time. And I'm like, okay, so I'm not going to duplicate all the tasks from all those different systems and put them into my OmniFocus just so that OmniFocus is the single source of truth.
Right.
I'm going to look at those things when I need to look at them, and I'm going to have a general idea of what I need to get done when. And I've got, big wall calendar in my office that kind of shows when my deadlines are. But then for daily planning, I am going to just write everything out. And I use a template inside of GoodNotes, which is amazing. This is the single most killer feature for the iPad Pro, in my opinion. GoodNotes is an absolutely amazing app. And if you really use the import your own PDF template feature, you can turn this into just about anything for planning. In fact, if you go to Etsy.com and you search for GoodNotes templates, you will find tons of digital template packs that people have created where you can just import them into GoodNotes and you can use them with your iPad and your Apple Pencil. It's amazing. And then the OCR is all your text. So you can go back, you can search everything. You need a new page, you just swipe from right to left, or you hit the little plus button in the upper right. You can select from any of your templated pages, so you can insert whatever you want whenever you need it. It's like having your own. So like if you've looked at the Self Journal or Michael Hyatt's Full Focus Planner, if you look at those, every time I've tried to use one of those, I've always like come close and liked the general ideas, but there's always been a couple things where it's like, I don't really want to do that. Okay. So what I found is like you can create your own templates, and I do it in OmniGraffle now, and you can pick and choose the pieces that you want and create a digital version that is exactly how you want it to work. And then you never have to buy another notebook again. You just pick and choose the pieces or the pages that you want, stick them wherever you want, and you can build your own digital planner. And that to me, I don't know. You're the analog guy, so there is something to be said for pen and paper. I get it. Like the right pen, the right paper, it just feels different. But with an iPad Pro and the new Apple Pencil specifically, it's shorter. It feels more like a pencil, and it feels much more natural in your hand. It feels close enough for me where I don't miss writing on paper every single day. Because I used to do that with my daily planning sheets. I used to print them off, make tablets, and I'd throw them away in the trash can every day after I was done. But this just feels so much better, and I can tweak the system as I go. I can go in OmniGraph, I can make a single change. Like my action item for this was to add that highlight section to the top of my page. I did that. Took a couple minutes. I got a new template, throw it in there, bam. I can continue to roll with that.
So here's some of my argument against, because I see this all the time. People want to use the iPads for this sort of thing. And so I have a paper notebook that I use for a lot of stuff. More on that in a little bit, because it's morphing right now. I had a situation this morning where one gentleman was trying to show me a few things on his iPad that he had sketched out and written. And I had my notebook there. I had my thumb and finger in, I think it was 4 different places in my notebook, and could flip back and forth between things very quickly and could look at 3, 4, 5 things at one time in that scenario. Technically speaking, you can get that done on an iPad, but it is nowhere near as simple as just stick your finger in it and physically move it.
That's true, although you can simple. Bookmark specific pages in your notebooks. So you can get back and forth between your bookmarks pretty quickly, and it's probably not as quick as the scenario that you're describing, but again, good enough.
And it is, of course, not near as tactile either.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. Although it feels pretty good. It's not going to feel the same, obviously, as a pen on paper, especially if you like those fancy fountain pens like you do.
Totally.
But I don't know. It gives you so many advantages that just really isn't that big a deal for me.
It's all right. Analog wins. Okay, now that said, I got to move on quick before you can argue with me. The problem with to-do lists, Mike. What's the problem with to-do lists?
All right. The problem with to-do lists, as the authors state in this section, is that they are usually a reflection of other people's priorities. No matter how many tasks you get done, there are always more to take its place, and they can obscure what's really important. I agree with all 3 of those things. What's your opinion on this?
This is... And I was so happy when I saw this on the outline. This is something I have been working towards and tweaking and conceptualizing for about a year now. And it's come out in a few places with 1 or 2 individuals who have previously worked for me under ProCourse. And they've mentioned this concept that within ProCourse, we've been operating on a project level. We don't dictate tasks. Like, we'll say, here is a project. Here are the general concepts of what need done. Go. Ask me if you have questions. Like, that's the way that we've operated. Because of that, I've been slowly morphing my own personal systems to just a simple project list, not necessarily a task list. Mm-hmm. Reviewing that list of projects on a daily basis and then making a today list. So just a daily list for now, what I got to get done today. And not worrying about breaking things out on a deeper level on a task or to-do list that I'm going to work off of each day. Like, it's only created for that one day. You get the difference there? It's not a long-term task list like what we traditionally see in something like OmniFocus. It's just maybe 3 or 4 or 5 things for today, and then a project list to help me reference to know what it is to do for today.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Now, all of the GTD purists are screaming at us right now because they're saying, well, you need to have a place where you can capture things so you don't forget about them.
Sure.
And that is one positive they call out with to-do lists, is that they allow you to capture things so you don't have to hold them in your brain. Although, as I thought about this, there's a couple different ways that I would need to capture things. Most of the things that I've wanted to capture lately, I realized, have been ideas. Those don't need to go in a task manager. That's kind of what I was doing. I had an ideas perspective inside of OmniFocus where I would tag things with ideas. They would show up there. And then when I decided I wanted to write a blog post or create a podcast or whatever on a topic, I would just select from that ideas bucket. But that doesn't have to exist in a task manager. And the other thing that a task manager, the service that it was the thing that it was doing for me was it was allowing me to be reminded of something that was due. And I don't think I need a full-on task manager for that sort of thing. I've been toying around with the idea of using the new Reminders app once iOS 13 and macOS Catalina comes out. It's got expanded functionality. It's got subtasks and things like that. It's still not anywhere close to the power or the functionality of something like Things or OmniFocus. But for me, I don't think I necessarily need it to be. I need to be able to say, ahoy, telephone, remind me to do this thing at this time. And Reminders is going to be more than enough for that. In the past, I've also used Do for that sort of thing with the nagging reminders. But I don't know. I think my life has simplified in recent history where I don't need to be reminded of a ton of things all the time. And I've got a little bit more control over my day and my schedule. So there's less of a chance that I'm going to just ignore something if my phone is telling me, hey, you really need to do this now.
Right.
That's my initial thought with this. You know, obviously I'll try it out and see. Maybe I do need something a little bit more powerful, but that's the thought process at the moment.
Yeah. No, and that makes sense. You know, and I alluded to this earlier, I'm in the process of trying out a lot of things on paper, and I found myself, because of this book and some other areas, you know, one of the action or the tactics later on is to write things on paper, like write something down today. I think, what is it, number 54? So I was combining that with doing a daily highlight. Like those two, pretty easy. Like I'm in the process of writing out a list each day now. But I was trying to get a feel for what do I do with these things that, like, it's not today, but it's sometime in the next week or the next month, or, you know, how do I handle that? So I was trying to figure out how to put together like a 6-month view, but I need to dial in on this month and then specifically today. And it occurred to me, that's the bullet journal. Like that's how that tends to operate. So I'm in the middle of kind of an experiment of sorts of just trying out the bullet journal process. I know there's a few other folks that are doing that in the productivity space right now,
myself included, but I don't follow it like the system that they talk about. I've taken basically the planning pieces of it, but I don't keep my master task list there.
Yeah, and I don't really think that a master task list is something I'm really going to keep at all. And I think that's what they're getting at. So what I've been doing is I've, of course, tweaked it. I don't do the whole dot thing that they do. I'm old school and use Patrick Roan's Dash Plus system. So I definitely think that Ryder kind of somewhat ripped that off of Roan. Like, it's very similar, but definitely different. Anyway, that's side note. So anyway, I've got some pretty different ways of using it, but it's kind of a heavily modified version of a bullet journal of sorts. So I'm trying that out. We'll see how it goes. But the main thing is for a way to help me manage projects and make decisions about projects as opposed to tasks themselves.
Yep, exactly. Well said. I think they talk about, by the way, at the beginning of this section, how goals can be useful for orienting you in the right direction, but they make it hard to enjoy the time that you spent working along the way, which I like the way that they describe that.
Yeah.
They say that tasks are too machine-like, goals are too far away, but in their opinion, highlight, that's the Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You know, that one is just right.
Yeah, totally.
And I tend to agree with them.
For sure. That's the highlight section, okay? Choosing one thing for today. How do you decide what it is that one thing is going to be today? The next section is laser. How do you laser focus on that one thing? We've got 3 tactics written down here. And I noticed, Mike, that one of those, I think, got both of us into an action item. Did I get this right? Oh, maybe you didn't. You didn't do it entirely. You copped out on it.
Well, I kind of. So I should mention here that this is not the first time I've read this book. I covered this as a Gap book a while ago. And one of the things that stood out to me in this section was this idea that you're alluding to, number 20, that is to clear your home screen. So my home screen is not completely clear. It has a couple of apps that I use for positive interactions with my phone at the top. So like right now, I've got my habit tracker, the shortcuts app, which I use to trigger my reflection template at the end of the day, the prayer app that I use, and the Bible app, which I've got a group reading plan with a couple of my discipleship guys. At the bottom in the dock, I've got my node, day one, drafts, and at the moment, OmniFocus, actually, but that will probably be gone soon. So those are all, if I were to go into any one of those apps, that's kind of a positive interaction with my phone. Twitter would not be there. Any of the other infinity pools would not be there. Email is not on my phone at all. Any of the things that are going to be a distraction are not going to show up on my home screen. They argue that you should just remove everything from your home screen. I didn't do that, but I did take the idea and prune things. By the way, the idea of distraction, I want to call it a quote from this section, or an idea from this section, because I really like this. They say that distraction is like a disco ball scattering your laser rays all over the place.
Yeah.
And I really like that. So obviously the goal is to eliminate the distractions. And you can do that, different ways. That's why they have all these different tactics and things that you can do. So another one here is like nix your notifications. That's number 19. A distraction-free phone, number 17.
Which I have as an action item. And I actually have been trying it. Like I'm not 100% there, but they have a number of steps to get to what they're calling a distraction-free phone.
Yep.
And I'm going through most of those. I haven't done all of them, but I'm darn close.
And they make a pretty compelling case for doing that. They share a couple of statistics. They say in 2017, Americans use their smartphones more than 4 hours per day. It's probably gone up since then. They cited a study that showed that people touched their phone on average 2,617 times per day in 2016. Again, it's probably gone up. And there's a great quote on page 88. They say, when we use our smartphones to navigate an unfamiliar city or have a video call with a friend or download an entire book in mere seconds, it's like having superpowers. But by default, we don't just get the best of modern technology. We get all of it all the time. We get futuristic superpowers and addictive distraction together on every screen. The better the technology gets, the cooler our superpowers will become, and the more of our time and attention the machines will steal. And I completely agree with that. And the rest of this section is basically tactics on how to eliminate those distractions and control your defaults.
Sending you a picture via iMessage, and it is a picture of my home screen.
Nice. Drafts made it back on.
Drafts is back on my phone.
It's the only thing.
It is the only thing on that first page because it's the only thing I have in my dock. And I have a few things on. There's 2 other pages to it. But first thing, we can put this in the show notes. First thing someone's going to ask me is, where is that picture from? That is from my trip to North Carolina last week. We were a mile up in the sky on a peak, and I took that picture with my phone. So that is where that came from. So that picture has some meaning to me personally. And the idea here is that whenever I open my phone, there's absolutely nothing for me to do but take notes into drafts. Like, that's the concept.
I like it.
And so far it's been pretty helpful. It means that it specifically forces me to think, wait, why am I here? As opposed to just letting the default be tap on the first thing that seems interesting. So because of the distraction-free phone process and going through that, like, there is no social media on my phone. There is no email. There's none of that. All it is either creation tools or things that are not just like distractions, like navigation and such. So that's all I've really got on it. But yeah, that's my home screen. Just drafts. That's it.
Nice. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I mentioned regarding the no social media stuff. One of the reasons that I'm only on Twitter, I actually like Instagram, but they refuse to make an iPad app. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to install Instagram on my phone because that's one of those infinity pools that I will get sucked into.
Right.
So again, I've kind of tempered the idea. I haven't gone all the way in like you have, but I've seen positive benefit from it. And I'm sure, the more you follow that idea, the more benefit you're going to get in terms of you're not going to be distracted by things on your phone. I would argue for anybody who's considering this, step one maybe is identifying or recognizing the problem first. So I honestly believe there may be people who just don't have an issue with distractions on their phone. I think they are probably very rare. I think most people do, and they just don't even think about it, so they don't realize it. But, maybe you don't need to delete everything, but maybe you do. And I think it's worth considering that you may fall into either of those categories.
It's true. There's another tactic here. Actually, we've got two more to go over here under the lasers section. You wrote down, watch out for time craters. What's a time crater, Mike?
I just like the idea of time craters. So they tell this story of one of them had gone to this place in Arizona, I think, where a meteor had hit and it was like a mile in diameter. And the meteor wasn't anywhere close to that big when it hit. But that's the idea, is that these small things can suck up a lot of time. And one of the examples that they use is composing a tweet inside of Twitter that maybe only takes few seconds, couple minutes, whatever, but then you end up scrolling through a bunch of other things, and then that leads to checking all the other things, and pretty soon you've spent a couple of hours because you were just going to compose a tweet, right? So that's the idea, is identifying what are the things that can really get you off the rails and eat up significant amounts of time. They also say that recovery time can be a time crater. So if you eat a big lunch, for example, you may have to, you will not have a ton of energy right after that. You're going to feel like going and taking a nap. So don't try to do something like write a bunch of words right after you've eaten a big meal. You can go ahead and eat a big meal if you want, but if you're going to, you have to recognize that there's going to be ramifications throughout the rest of your day that are tied to that one simple act. And I don't have an action item associated with this. I just really like this idea. And I think it's something that people should be aware of, because it always starts off as just one little thing. And this can, by the way, also be applied in the positive, where, like, let's say you want to create an exercise habit. You don't say, I'm going to go to the gym for an hour. You say, I'm just going to go on the treadmill for 5 minutes. And then once you get on there, you complete the workout because you're already there, So the idea being that small actions can have a big impact. And in this specific case, obviously, in terms of distractions, it's a negative thing.
Sure. I can't say I am good at this, but I definitely have time craters.
Everybody does. That's kind of the point. Like, they're going to be different for everybody. Yeah. You may not be tempted to go compose a tweet if you're not on Twitter.
Right.
But maybe you like scrolling through Amazon. I don't know.
Thus, and this is where, like, the distraction-free phone thing comes in for me, because that's way more effective. Because if I have a time crater, it's on my phone. I don't really deal with that as much on my Mac, which is kind of weird. You would think it would be way easier to do it there. But I have a tendency to see my Mac as a tool to get work done, and my phone historically has been a what do I call that? A pacifying device.
Yep.
So I have a tendency to deal with issues on the phone more so than the Mac. Thus, creating a distraction-free phone. The number of times I've pulled it out, seen this beautiful landscape, and thought, oh yeah, and then close it and put it back in my pocket. I don't want to know how many times I've done that. So
yeah,
it does work. It is successful in that sense.
I don't have a screenshot, but I know that David Sparks, my Focus podcast partner, is talking about how he created like this 6-month wallpaper, and he puts it on his desktop, but he also put it on his phone, I believe. And he's got basically his outline for all the things that he wants to get done for the next 6 months on there. And he keeps his iPhone home screen clean so that he sees that every time he opens it. And
Sure.
just by looking at like, oh, I've got this field guide that I want to launch in a couple of months, like that's enough for him to not go be distracted by something, but buckle down and do the actual work.
Yeah.
A couple other time creators I wanted to call out here. Email is absolutely a time creator. And another one that I thought of is your task manager. This can totally be a time creator. I recognize that this is kind of where OmniFocus fell for me, is like, I'm not using it to its full capacity, so I need to put more things in here. I need to take advantage of all these fancy perspectives. I need to review every week, even though I don't have that many things to review. Like, it just got to be more time spent babysitting the system than was justified in terms of what I needed to get done. In fact, when I was launching Faith-Based Productivity, I mean, you saw this because you actually slept in my office. Like, I had everything written out on the whiteboard. Yeah. That was everything I had planning-wise for Faith-Based Productivity.
Sure.
I knew what I needed to do based off of everything that was on that whiteboard. I didn't create all the projects and things in OmniFocus because I didn't want to have to go back there. I just had to have something where when I walked into the office, I saw it, I saw the date circled there, and I'm like, okay, time to get to work. And I knew what I needed to do. So I think that if you are going to try and track every minute detail of the things that you are going to do, that could definitely be a time creator too.
For sure.
Where you're fiddling with the system instead of doing the actual work.
Another tactic in the laser section is number 53. Avoid the allure of fancy tools.
Yes.
Okay, Mike, you and I have both worked in the productivity space for a long time. How many times have you seen people decide to try a different task manager just because they feel it will make them more productive?
So many times. This was interesting because I recognize that when someone says, oh, I found this new app and it's great, it does all these things, my initial response is, I'm not going to use that because it's going to be gone in 6 months.
Right.
Even if it's not, I tend to not try those things until the app has been around for several years. And like, okay, I guess it's sustainable. I'm going to give it a shot.
Sure.
One specific area where you see this all the time is third-party email apps on iOS. There is not a good third-party email app, in my opinion, for iOS. There are lots of options. Spark is the least sucky one, but
you know what that means though, Mike, right? Don't do email on your iPad.
Exactly. Well, that's kind of that's kind of the place I've landed. Even though I'm using my iPad more and I really like it, there isn't a great application for email on there. If I could get MailMate on my iPad, I'd be really happy. But I'm okay with just saying the Mac is going to be the place where I'm going to check email. It's more efficient that way anyways, when I've got a keyboard with me all the time. And the iPad is going to be used for the other things, like different devices, different modes. That's a completely valid approach. But the point I wanted to make was that Dispatch was the one app that I was like, yes, this is the thing for iOS. Because you could send things to different places, different applications, and you could use that message URL scheme. So once you sent it, you could still get to those messages, even if you weren't using Dispatch on your Mac, which there was no Mac app, so that was no problem. But it hasn't been updated in years, and nobody else has used that default message URL scheme. Everybody uses the proprietary one. If you send something to a task manager in Spark or Airmail, you're going to have to use an Airmail or Spark URL scheme, which means that you click on that on your Mac, you're going to have the Mac version of that app in order to view it. And that's a big deal to me. It's probably not a big deal to a lot of people. And so if you don't understand that, don't even worry about it. But that was a big part of my productivity workflow. And when Dispatch just became terrible, I'm like, man, come on. Like, throw me a bone. Just update this for me. But obviously they're not going to do that. And it's hard. Really, the bottom line is that it is hard to make money on the iOS App Store for that particular product category, especially given probably all the infrastructure that you need in order to implement all of those features that people want. And you have to recognize that there are whole categories, I guess, of applications where people will just decide it's not worth it. And you're not going to be able to do what you used to do. Not just a particular app, but third-party email clients. Like I said, there is not a single one in there that I would trust at the moment.
Right.
Task managers maybe are a little bit more stable, and I don't know, like Evernote replacement type apps. Like, I don't know what category you would call that. Reference apps, maybe, but I think that's not a great representation of those types of apps. you can pick your category and you may find something that is going to be more stable, but like that's always in the back of my mind is like, when is this going to go away? It's only going to be a matter of time before they just decide that I'm not going to do this anymore. Even OmniFocus has been around forever. You know, that one's probably, you could make a case for that one being the most stable, but who knows? It could be gone tomorrow. You really can't be sure.
Right. And I feel like this comes up more and more. Like I've had a handful of folks ask me about tools that are web-based. They don't really want the app, even if it has it. And it has to do with the website is more universal, so they don't have to be locked into a specific device even. So me personally, I've been on this boat for a while with, you know, moving over to text files and analog, because I just get tired of these things dying off.
Yeah.
You know, Evernote was the one that bit me hard to begin with and kind of started me down that trail. They made it to where I either had to pay them or not use the tool. And like, well, I'm not spending that amount of money per year to just throw things at it. So goodbye. Like, you know, That's the way that has gone for me. So thus, I'm playing around with bullet journal. I've played around with things like that in my notebooks for a long time. I've moved a lot of things over to text files. I will use tools once in a while like NVAlt, but only because it uses text files on the back end. This is the only reason I've considered, what's the one, rethink people refer to quite a bit. I've considered that a few times because you can store the files in text files, but the UI has been terrible historically. So, like, I just don't want to be locked into some proprietary stuff. I played with Bear, I played with Ulysses, I've played with, you know, Apple Notes and all that, but at the end of the day, I'm dependent on that app staying around. And it doesn't necessarily stay around.
Yeah. So
what do you do?
Exactly. Now, I will say that, like I mentioned, I use GoodNotes a lot, and I really like GoodNotes. I would recommend GoodNotes to anybody. And you may say, well, might GoodNotes disappear? Yes, it is possible that GoodNotes can disappear. But the difference, I would argue, with GoodNotes is that you can export all of the things that are in there as PDF files. So you mentioned text files. I would argue PDF files are the other thing that are kind of timeless.
Yep.
And so kind of have an exit strategy, I guess, for any app that you're going to use. Like, if I really need to get everything out of here, can I do so? And what's it going to look like? If GoodNotes disappears tomorrow and I have to export everything as PDF files, I'm not going to be sad that I have all of these PDFs. They're not going to be sitting in a useless pile on my desktop. Like, what do I do with these? They're PDFs. I can use them anywhere.
Right. Yeah, I would say like PDFs, picture files, text files, even markdown files, you know, for the most part, those are all, to me, safe file formats to operate in for the long term. Text files have been around since day one. It's not going anywhere. So I don't know. We've beat this pretty hard at this point, but the key point that they're making is that if you're going to stay laser focused, spending your time playing around with new tools and exploring new stuff, or trying to do something fancy with like Scrivener and such, like that type of thing, just stay away from it. It's going to just create more bloat in the process when you should be working on your highlight. I think that's their point.
Yeah, definitely. So when everyone's talking about the new Task Manager hotness, don't feel like, oh, I need to go check that out because maybe it'll solve a problem for me.
Right.
It's probably going to just eat up a bunch of your time as you look at it and try it out, and then you realize that, oh, this isn't going to be the right thing anyways, and you're going to go back to the old thing, but you're going to have wasted a bunch of time. There's also a whole section in here, which I just want to call out. We don't have anything specific from here, but the whole idea of slowing your inbox is an interesting idea. And number 38 specifically, be slow to respond. They mentioned shifting from as fast as I can to as slow as I can get away with. I feel like I've done this with email for the last couple of years,
right? But
they articulated it way better than I would have. So that's the basic idea with a lot of these things. And I think the baseline of as slow as you can get away with is going to be different for different people, different situations, but that should be what you're aiming for.
Yeah. And I will say, this is something I'm working towards. I have it as an action item off of number 34, which is email at the end of the day, and only once a day. And historically, I haven't been able to do that because of the client side of things, but I'm transitioning out of that, and I've been offloading all of my client business. So that means that I can get to this point. So I'm in the middle of all of that transition right now. So as part of that, probably by the time we hit max stock, by the time we record next, Mike, I should be able to be at that point where I'm just doing it once a day. So I'm finally going to be solving some of my email nightmares.
Nice.
Woo!
All right, next section, energy.
Yes. I'm excited about this section, even though we only have 2 points here. And neither one really covers a whole bunch of energy. But energy is something I've had to pay very close attention to because of the whole Lyme disease stuff I fight. So, yes, energy levels.
Right. So this section has a bunch of tactics which are going to appear, well, I guess depending on your frame of reference, but if you have been following the productivity space for any length of time, you probably heard all of this stuff before. For example, exercise, eat right, disconnect, and get enough sleep. Really, that's kind of the main ideas here. But there's specific tactics from here, which I feel like this section has some gold in it. Number one that I want to talk about is actually number, let's see, what is this? It's in the outline, number 70, which is to wake up before you caffeinate. And this is something that struck me the first time that I read this, and I feel like I've kind of made this shift already. But even before I read this, I recognized for myself that I didn't want to drink coffee like as soon as I woke up. But they explain why that is not a great idea. They mention that your cortisol is high when you first wake up, and if you drink coffee when you have cortisol coursing through your veins, then it's not going to do a lot of good for you. If you wake up at 7 a.m., you really want to wait until about 9:30 to have your first cup of coffee. And I think that this makes a ton of sense and probably reduces the amount of coffee that you would typically drink. And then they have this little grid here in the book. They have like the curve, like your energy levels. And they talk about the prime time for caffeine. They show like the afternoon dip, and kind of like if you're going to drink coffee in the afternoon, this is the point where you should do it. And after 4 p.m., basically like absolutely do not touch the stuff. I know you're actually a little bit more strict about this even than what they articulate here, but basic idea being that you need to give your body enough time to for that caffeine to work its way through if you don't want it to interfere with you going to bed at night.
Right. Yeah, I've known that you shouldn't do coffee immediately when you get up. I can't say that I thought through it a whole lot to decide when I would, just because by the time I get up and get around and get to making it, it's already an hour after I've been up. I do have it as an action item, though, to wait a little bit longer than what I normally do, because I think for me, I'm still into it a little bit early. I've tried it the last couple days of waiting until it's about 2.5 hours after the time I get up before I have that first cup. Seems to make a little bit of a difference. I can't say it's drastic, but I'm going to keep it as a build into my habit structure right now, just to see how it pans out long term. But yeah, I know that if I'm going to drink coffee, I need to be finished drinking coffee in the day by like 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, so that I've had more than ample time for that to get out of my system before bedtime at night. Otherwise, Joe can't sleep too well.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the important thing I would argue with this whole section on optimizing caffeine, because they actually have a whole bunch of tips related to this, like take a caffeine nap, that sort of thing. And I feel like the idea that you really need to understand here is that caffeine should be used sparingly, I guess. And also you need to recognize when to do it optimally so that it doesn't become the crutch that most people think of it as, or most people who don't drink coffee, for example, They kind of view this as like an addiction that you absolutely can't break away from. And every single year I go on like a 21-day fast at the beginning of the year. I'd give up coffee for 21 days just to show my body like I'm boss. You can't control me.
Yeah.
So that stuff really doesn't bother me when people say that. I really do just enjoy the taste of a good cup of coffee, but I can function without it. And I think, the point of this section is that it can be a help. It doesn't have to be a hindrance, but you do have to recognize the effect. And when you know that, you can apply it strategically to help you focus on and laser on your highlight.
We have another tactic here. Number 81, spend time with your tribe. In other words, hang out with people, Mike. Thus, MacStock. Like that segue?
Yeah, so you went straight to the end for this one. But I put this on here because they say that even introverts are hardwired for connection. I just spent a week with my family in Door County, which was awesome. But at one point during that vacation, I admit I told my wife my ideal vacation is an island with nobody on it. So I guess, when I read this section again, it hit me that even for someone like me, who I would consider myself very introverted, I need to spend time with the right people, finding those people who can give me energy. And one of the action items that I had on here from the last time that I read it, that I actually did for the last episode, I believe, was to make a list of energy givers. I did that when I identified all my plus people,
Because I made the list. Woo!
Yeah. So I kind of did that already. But yeah, specifically MacStock, I would argue that's, for me, spending time with my tribe. Last time I was at MacStock, I found by the time we went home, I was like kind of depressed. And I recognized on the way home, I said something along the lines to my wife, something along the lines of like, these are my people. Like they get me.
Yeah.
So recognizing who is your tribe, I think, is important. And then surrounding yourself with those people as often as you can is also important. Maybe you can't do it in person all that often. It would be great if MacStock happened multiple times per year, but it's not going to happen. That is why I go down whenever I can to like the Relay Live events, though. And I'm toying with the idea of going out to San Francisco for the 5-year anniversary thing. It's going to be expensive, but again, that's my tribe. Those are my people.
Right.
And every time I get around those people, I just feel, I don't even really know how to describe it. It feels like home, more so than actually being home. Like around here where I live, there are a handful of people who are Mac nerds, who listen to podcasts, who care about productivity, but they're the exception, not the rule. You're not going to just bump into those types of people when you're out about town. And it's probably the same thing for you, even though you're close to Minneapolis. Like you could probably find those people easier than I could. But I don't know, like it's fine most of the time for me not to physically be in the same place with those people. But I recognize that every time I am physically in the same place with those people, it does rejuvenate me. It does something inside of me. And so I can't manufacture that as often as I would like, but step one is identifying the places and the times where that can really happen.
Sure.
And then investing in that. It's hard for me to quantify the value of going and being in that place and being around those people, because it will inspire me and that momentum will carry on for weeks after I've been there. It's not just the dollar value of booking a flight and finding a hotel and then the time that you're going to be there. Like going to Craft and Commerce, for example, that was another place where like I was really energized by my time there. And if you open your eyes to the opportunities that are around you, those experiences, those are the things that are really going to stick and going to be worthwhile. So that's not really an action item that I want to like pick something else to go to, but kind of in the back of my mind is like, be looking for those things.
Sure. Yeah, I feel like I hang out with a number of groups of people on a pretty regular basis. Again, we're in a higher populated area than I think what you are. But at the same time, it's all about different types of tribes too.
Yep.
If I'm hanging out with a small group from church, that's one area, and I love hanging out with our small group.
Totally.
But I also have this tribe around computers and nerdery, thus Macstock. And that kind of scratches the itch there. You know, I'm finding people in my area that are into books. So Bookworm has kind of got some local following as well. Hi, folks. You know, those tribes are different, but they're also very important to connect with people in those different areas. So
yeah,
that's a piece of it that I've been trying to focus on more recently, and this simply confirmed that.
And the Bookworm Club, for example, that can totally be this for a lot of people. But it's not going to do the same thing as being physically in the same place. So you can absolutely join the Bookworm Club, attend the live recordings, like be part of the conversation. That is a version of spending time with your tribe. And you can be energized by hanging out in the same place online. You know, I don't want to discount that because there is a lot of value in that.
Sure.
But it isn't the same. It isn't the same as looking Joe in the eyeball and talking about stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And there are a handful of opportunities to do that every single year. And, you know, the value of doing that is greater than just the cost associated with it, in my opinion. You know, even for an introvert like me, I recognize that that's the stuff that really recharges my batteries, because that's, you know, this whole section, you know, the energized section, that's what it's all about.
So we've picked our highlight. We have laser focused on it. We have learned how to maintain energy for that laser focus. Once you've done those aspects of this system that Mike didn't want to go about,
this non-system,
you need to reflect on what you've done so far. And they bring up the scientific method. I don't have that list in front of me, and I am not a scientist, so I cannot refer you to the exact steps. I'm sure Mike will have it by the time I'm done here. But once you've gotten into the end of this process, the goal is to revise and reiterate, like go over it again. You have to figure out what happened, what went wrong, make a hypothesis of how to change it, make an edit, and go about determining what to do next. Is that fair?
Yeah. So the scientific method that they outline is observe what's going on, guess why things are happening the way they are, experiment to test your hypothesis, and measure the results and decide if you were right. And that's why they've got their own tracking sheet that they use. Again, you know, I've got a reflection template. I'm not tracking how focused I was or what my energy levels were, although I definitely see that as being valuable if that's where you want to, if that's what you want to tweak. You know, if you really want to just maximize your energy levels, it's valuable to track that sort of stuff for a period of time until you get that nailed down. I feel like I've been doing that for a while. There's a whole section in the energy part about sleep, for example, and you know, I don't need to go there, but you know, I've mentioned before that's something that I care deeply about,
right?
Because of the epilepsy I've been diagnosed with. So I've been applying a lot of that stuff, and so I just at this point have no need to track that energy level because I know that the things that I'm doing are the right things. I just need to keep doing them. But if you wanted to use that, totally take it. They've also got 3 hypotheses that they share here regarding the highlight, laser, and energize. The highlight hypothesis is that if you set a single intention at the start of each day, they predict you'll be more satisfied, joyful, and effective. The laser hypothesis is that if you create barriers around the busy bandwagon and infinity pools, they predict you'll focus your attention like a laser beam. And the energize hypothesis is that if you love a little more like a prehistoric human, they predict you'll enhance your mental and your physical energy. Or live a little more. Sorry, that's a typo.
Yeah. So on the energized piece, I think a piece of that we didn't cover is that they refer to our caveman days and how we used to live.
Yeah, what's that guy's name? Urk?
Urk. U-R-K, Urk. So live like Urk. He
Yep.
hunted and gathered his food, which meant that he was moving all the time, spent time in community with his people, and the type of food that he ate was all natural whole foods. You get the idea.
Yep. He went
Paleo.
to bed when it was dark, yada, yada, yada.
Yep. So anyway, that's the hypothesis there. So
Yeah, so I really don't think we need to spend a ton of time in this reflect section,
Yeah.
other than like the main idea here is have some sort of way to measure if what you are doing is working. And it doesn't have to even have a number associated with it. You can just generally jot down, how do you feel at the end of the day? The way I do this with my reflection template is just a star rating. And I've got 1 through 5 stars. How'd you do overall today? And if there was something that happened, I'm going to jot that down in that entry that impacted that. But I don't know, like I've kind of tweaked this system to the point now where I know what the right things are to do. I need to get up early, which means I have to go to bed at a decent time the night before. I need to eat healthy, and I need to exercise. That's the big thing. I got to know what my highlight is going into the beginning of my day, or the big thing that I want to get done. And that's one of the big changes I'm going to make. And I've actually already made it. I mentioned to my daily planning sheet, adding that highlight section to it, just a refinement of those things. But, feel free, I guess, to make this your own. Just keep an eye on this. Don't just blindly go from one day to the next and, I hope this is going to work out in the end.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know that I don't have an action item on the reflect piece because I have some reflective type time built into my days that will tell me if I'm on the right track or not, what I need to change. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's good. It's a good thing to do. I think if you're doing absolutely nothing, following their recommendations is an excellent place to start. I just think that we have experience with this at this point.
Yep.
So trying to adopt their methodology doesn't make any sense, I don't think.
Right. No, I agree. All right. Action items?
Totally. I'm game.
All right. So I've got a couple, which I've kind of mentioned, I've been applying this stuff as we go. The big one that I applied from this going through the book this time, but I've already done this, is adding a highlight section to my daily planning template. And I really, really like this. This has made a big difference for me. There's a whole section in here on sleep that I mentioned. And there was one thing that I jotted down when I went through this the first time. The action item was to try a sleep mask, because they mention you want to block out all the light and you want to fake the sunset by cutting the blue light, by dimming the lights, that sort of thing. And the sleep mask was the inexpensive solution that I'm like, I should just try that, even though I never liked the idea of wearing something on my face as I went to bed. But after I wrote that down, my wife decided to get blackout curtains for our bedroom, which have been amazing. So I've actually already done that one.
Okay.
But these are great. I love them. And we also have it's not a gravity blanket, but it's one of those weighted blankets on our bed.
Yep.
So you get in and this thing is on top of you, and it takes a couple of minutes before it's like sleeping in a warm hug.
Yeah.
Like you're ready for bed, and you don't want to get up until the morning. Like it's hard to describe the effect that it has on me, but it helps me transition into sleep a lot easier.
Sure.
So those have been a couple things that I've already done that have been great. And then the other one I mentioned, condensing my home screen. I've done that. I'm kind of thinking through, are there additional ways that I can do this? I'm sure there are. I'm not going to go all the way to the point that you have, but I'm going to try to trim this down even further.
All right. I expect updates and screenshots, by the way.
All right.
Prove it, in other words. So anyway, on my side, I have 5 down here. They're pretty quick. Some of them are already done. One is explore bullet journaling. I'm doing an experiment in the month of July to see how it goes. For those who are into bullet journaling, leave a comment on this episode in the club and let me know if you think a month is enough time for that experiment. I kind of speculate that it's not, but a month is a long time for me with an experiment. I don't know if that's enough. So if you have experience with this, help me out here. That's one. 2, I blanked out my home screen. That one's done. I've gone through the process of building a distraction-free iPhone. Still got one or two things I got to do on that yet, but I'll detail those out in the club as well. Moving email to once a day at the end of the day. I'm in transition getting there right now, so it'll take a little bit of time to get that one. And then one I'm working on already is waiting until I drink my first cup of coffee in the morning, just to let my body fully wake up before the day starts.
Nice.
There you go. Style and rating. What'd you think, Mike?
So, like I said, this is the second time that I read this. Interesting observation as I went through and looked at, all the different action items that I had written down the first time. I had implemented most of them, even though I typically don't implement action items from non-bookworm books. This book just really impacted me, some of the different tactics. And that's really, in my opinion, the beauty of this book. We mentioned earlier that our perspective on how we read books has changed. It doesn't have to completely change your life. There just has to be a couple of things that you really like and that you're going to apply. This book is the perfect book for that because there are so many things in here, and they give you permission right at the beginning to pick and choose the ones that you want. They mention at the very beginning, this is not a productivity. This is not I would argue, a systems book because it's not going to be prescriptive of this is what you need to do in order to get this result. They basically say, here's a whole bunch of stuff. Here's our experience with it. You may want to try some of this stuff and see if it works for you. But the stuff that they share is really, really good. It's also very, very approachable. As people who maybe are interested in productivity books, but are put off by some of the used car salesman type of speech, like there's none of that in here.
Sure. The
illustrations are really entertaining. I think that I'm kind of sad that it took me so long to find this book. Even for someone who has been in the productivity space for a long time, there was a lot of stuff in here that I really, really enjoyed. I would recommend this to absolutely anybody. I really am having a hard time finding a reason not to rate it 5 stars. I think I got to rate it 5 stars. Like I said, it's really the kind of thing that will speak to anybody, no matter what situation you happen to find yourself in. You'll find one idea in here that just really it speaks to you, and the whole thing, even if you went through it and found absolutely nothing, is very entertaining. Like they have a very relaxed, approachable, fun writing style. The fact that there's 2 different authors, like this is the first book we've read where it feels like they've both contributed and it's been a positive.
Right.
So yeah, I think this is a great book, and I'm really curious to hear your perspective on it because I know you really liked Michael Hyatt, and in my opinion, this is kind of like the other end of the spectrum compared to that one.
Right. I will say I will join you. These guys are awesome to read. They do a fantastic job keeping you engaged. Every once in a while you run across one that's kind of hard to put down. We read a lot of these, but they don't always necessarily hit that point where I want to go grab it and read it. There's quite a few points where I find myself like it's a good book. I enjoy reading it, but it doesn't draw me to it, if you get what I'm saying. So this one definitely had me wanting to make time to sit down and read it, and they definitely kept you engaged. It's the first time you're right. There's 2 authors, but they do a fantastic job of letting each of them speak because although it's co-authored, they have call-outs where Jake wrote this piece, and John, or Jay-Z as they refer to him in the book, Jay-Z definitely wrote this other section. And sometimes they have competing opinions about things.
Yes.
Like morning versus night. Like, should you do important highlight work in the morning or should you do it at night? Well, one of them does it in the morning and the other one does it at night, so they can't give you one particular opinion on it. They fight over it. So it's kind of fun to see those battles take place within the book. This is one that if you're in the productivity space, you've been there for a long time, you're going to get a lot out of it. If you're brand new to it, it's very approachable, easy to get a lot out of it. I have to join you at the 5.0. This is a fantastic book. I'm with you. I wish I had seen this earlier. And frankly, I kind of wish I had run across this much earlier in my productivity journey. It's a great one to get started with, but it's also a great one to continue to get better with. It's fascinating in that it's not really a system, but it's a flow.
Yeah.
to work through, and it's not like task level, and it's not necessarily goal level. It's that middle ground of the project level, which is what I was referring to earlier in the episode. So it's a piece of it. And Michael Hyatt did this to some degree too in Free to Focus, in trying to help you determine what projects should or shouldn't you be operating with. And I think they do a wonderful job of helping that come out. So I absolutely love this book and highly recommend it to anyone who's interested in it.
Awesome.
All right, let's put this one on the shelf. Next time, we're covering one that's been out for quite a while. I think it's been recommended for a while. It's towards the top of the vote list, though I didn't know that when I picked it. The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. Strong opinions on Tim Ferriss, one way or the other. Some people absolutely adore him. Some people cannot stand him. That's probably why he's so successful. We need to cover this one, Mike. It's been kind of looming over us for a while.
Get your popcorn ready. That's all I'm going to say.
Have you read this one before?
I started. I had to put it down because I couldn't stand Tim Ferriss. But I'm going to finish it this time.
I have never... I have the book. I have not even cracked it open. I've never been into this book in any way, shape, or form in the past. So
I feel like this is a very dangerous book.
Okay. That's fair.
But we'll see. All right, so I have in the document here some question marks for my upcoming book, but I do actually have a book. I looked at the votes. You encouraged people to vote before we started because I tend to pick things live.
You do this every time.
Yeah, I'm not picking this one live, but I am looking at. I did look earlier today at the ones that people had voted for. The next one, highest on the list that we have not covered, is Sapiens. With MaxDoc coming up, can't read this one. It's like 500 pages.
Okay, sure.
So I'm going to go down the list, and there's a couple of them that are tied below that. It doesn't have to be Crazy at Work and Second Mountain by David Brooks. One of the people in my mastermind who I'm going to try and get to submit a picture of their library, because they actually have, I've been told, one of those like sliding ladders that I want in my library someday.
Oh, I totally want one of those.
Yes. Well, Michael Diamond, we have we link to, and we can link to it again. He's got a list of great books on his website.
Okay.
He did not vote for this in the Bookworm Club, but he has told me recently in a mastermind meeting that I should read Second Mountain by David Brooks. So that is going to be the tiebreaker for me.
Okay.
And that is the one that I'm going to pick. I looked at the description of this briefly on Amazon, and it's really, it sounds interesting. It sounds like the type of book that speaks to kind of finding your purpose, which as the developer of faith-based productivity, like that's something I'm interested in. And I feel like that's something that a lot of our listeners probably are interested in too. It'll be kind of cool to go through a book like that. And so that's the one I'm going to pick.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. I have a Gap book that I recently finished up. That I'm just now starting. I just finished one. Now I'm into another one. Anyway, this one is High Performance Habits by Brendan Burchard? I don't know how you say his last name. Burchard. That's what I'm going to run with. High Performance Habits. I picked this one up at like a Goodwill somewhere. It was like $3, I think. But I've seen him around, Brendan, a few places, and I've seen this book mentioned in quite a few places. Curious to see, well, I'll put it this way. I thought it was going to be similar to Atomic Habits, which is why I haven't started it. I've had it for a few months now. I thought it was going to be very similar to that, but it's not.
Yeah, you thought wrong.
Yeah, I definitely thought wrong. It's more about what habits should you be building to become a high-performance individual as opposed to performing good habits, if you get the difference there. So I had a misunderstanding on it.
Yeah, so if you take James Clear and apply some Tim Ferriss with a dash of Grant Cardone, you get Brendan Burchard.
Maybe a little bit of Tony Robbins in there.
Yeah. I don't think that's one I'm going to be reading.
That's fair.
My Gap book, which I actually finished up, I read through it in a couple of days. It was very entertaining, was Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman and Mark Winters, I believe. The idea behind this book is that a good company requires two different types of entrepreneurs, a visionary and an integrator. And they've got an assessment so you can identify which one you are. And there were several aha moments from going through this one. I'll upload the MyNode file to the Bookworm Club for premium members, so you can download that and take a look at some of the things in there. But it's interesting, and I feel like a lot of the things that they share are very true, but there is definitely, I don't know, I feel like this one elicits strong opinions too, not to the level of somebody like Tim Ferriss probably, but Gino Wickman is also the co-author, I think, of Traction and kind of the architect of the EOS system, which seems to elicit some strong opinions from people.
Fair enough. Well, that brings us to something I need to clarify, because I have mentioned this in a couple different places, some publicly, some behind the premium
the
wall.
Moment we've all been waiting for, the big reveal.
I know. So in the premium membership on the club, the Bookworm Club, which, by the way, bookworm.fm/membership, and you can sign up. Mike has been posting his book notes for his Gap books and the Bookworm books.
Most of them,
yeah. I don't take my notes in such a way that are conducive for sharing, and they don't make much sense to really anyone but me. So I was trying to figure out, like, okay, I've been reading these Gap books. I've got notes on the Bookworm episodes. The Bookworm episode notes come out in the recording, as we've seen today. But my Gap books don't really come out in any way, shape, or form, and I was trying to nail down how do I go about sharing these. So what I've done, and I've recorded one already, but I'm recording like 15-minute overviews of those Gap books. I've recorded one for All Marketers Are Liars by Seth Godin. I've got some notes written down for Essential Manners for Men that I'll record that one probably when we're done recording this one. And I'm going to trickle those out next week, which means before this episode goes live. So by the time you're hearing this, premium members, you will have seen 2 of these little 15-minute overview episodes. And if you are interested in those, you can do that, again, at bookworm.fm/membership. And I'm going to start doing these for all of my Gap books, just because I feel like I want to share my thoughts on them. And it's kind of my way of sharing my Gap books, whereas Mike does his MyNode files. So there you go.
Yeah, Joe tried to get me to do this, but I'm terrified of the idea of sitting down by myself in front of a microphone for 15 minutes when I don't have a script in front of me. So
yep.
I'm going to continue to do the MyNode files.
I'm pretty good at sitting and just rambling sometimes, so we'll see how focused they are, but, here we are. So that said, if you're interested in that, join the premium membership. Again, as you've probably noticed, we've been slowly adding things to that premium membership. There's access to a members only section. You get a badge on your avatar on the club. You get Mike's book notes. There's an exclusive 4K resolution Bookworm wallpaper for your computer. There's now going to be my Gap book episodes. You can listen to the recording live. Like, there's going to be a lot going on with the premium membership. So if you haven't joined that, highly recommend it. That said, you can also recommend a book to us. You've noticed Mike continues to pick from that list. I do once in a while as well. Join the club, click the button for recommend a book, and make sure you vote for other ones that are coming up so that Mike gets a pick done and gets the one you want. Sapiens is long, though, and I know we're going to have to cover it at some point. There's also a list of books on the main website, so bookworm.fm/list. It's all the books we've covered in the past, so that way you can see everything we've covered. There's tons and tons of books out there, so go check those out for sure.
All right. And I want to call out the Bookworm Club one more time and ask you to go and share your own action items. Join the conversation around ours, or if you have some of your own, feel free to share those as well. It doesn't have to be something that we got from the episode. We want to hear how these books are impacting your lives as well. And if you want to support the show, there's a couple ways that you can do that. You already mentioned the premium membership for the Bookworm Club. You can also go over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. The other way you can support the show, I guess we don't really talk a lot about this, but all of the links in the show notes are affiliate links. So if you decide to pick up a book and read along with us, then if you use one of those links, that buys Joe and I a cup of coffee when we see each other at MacStock.
Definitely appreciate that. All right, that said, we're going to go into a landmine next time with The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. Looking forward to this one, Mike. Tune in next time. We'll catch you then.